Marcosatsu.
I've been pretty vocal on what I think about Kamen Rider video games. They're usually pretty okay, and can be compared to anime video games, especially when it came to arena fighters. Previously, my dream Rider game came true with Memory of Heroes, an adventure style that, while not AAA, still had a lot of what I wanted. A good story with plenty of levels for a limited but focused cast of characters to travel through and fight bosses. Now for my next wish, I really want a proper fighting game. I personally think arena fighters are kind of boring, and the two we have are bare bones. But I don't think that can be helped with this subgenre. It's just what comes with the territory. We did have the Climax Hero series in previous generations, and those are 3D fighters similar to Tekken that had absolutely no consideration for balance. They were actually a lot of fun, with ginormous rosters. But I'm talking something more proper, something that would take a bit longer to make, and focus on making a product good enough to be in tournaments alongside everything else at EVO. I doubt this game would ever actually make it to EVO, but I'm just saying maybe it could. It doesn't have to be like Dragon Ball FighterZ or Tekken. I basically want a side view fighting game that does care about balance and the history of the franchise. I got asked on Twitter to make a video about the idea, similar to Thorgy's Build a Roster series. Well, outside of Tokusatsu, I am a ginormous gamer. I play games pretty much non-stop when I can, but I'm not mainly a fighting game guy. I have played my own share of them: Marvel vs. Capcom, Soul Calibur, Tekken, Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Smash Bros, JoJo's. Pretty much all the big names you can think of, I've most likely played. Even still, I don't think I'm the most knowledgeable when it comes to them, but I feel like I might know enough where I can at least make a surface level assessment of what I'd like to see. For this first part, I want to be as realistic as I can, putting into consideration how production works with a limited budget. And well, we should get into it. Okay, so we should probably name this game. It should be in a similar essence as a spiritual successor to the Climax Hero series, so let's keep that. Climax. I thought I'd have to think about this a lot, but the next easiest word to me should be fairly obvious. Climax Heroes, Climax Fighters, Climax Scramble, and now let's introduce Kamen Rider Climax Arena. Climax is a funny word. So how would it play? Some might gravitate towards a platform fighter Smash Bros type, and while that does sound fun, I'd want a game more suited for the close-up traditional 1v1 style. I'm most familiar with the 3D gameplay of Tekken and JoJo's, but if this is an evolution as well as a baseline for future Rider games, then I'd say let's keep going with that idea. While Street Fighter is more traditional, I don't think it would be Kamen Rider if our two fighters couldn't move around in the arena at least slightly. Plus, there's Mugen if you really want a traditional 2D fighter. And now for the fun part, the roster. Like I said, I'll keep this a bit realistic to start, so we won't have a ginormous 60+ character roster at first. Besides, Climax Heroes has that big of a roster since they kept building on top of their previous games. It didn't just happen overnight. The same with Climax Fighters and Scramble. They started small and built on top of each other with previous models and such. However, I'll also include a few DLC characters as a season pass, since that's kinda the norm now in the modern day. Fighters and Scramble had DLC too, but not to this extent. We'll just keep going for the fanbase. So for our baseline roster, well, it was difficult enough just thinking of how many characters to start with. You could easily say, oh, just include all 20 main Heisei Riders plus the Reiro Riders. But you see, Climax Heroes was able to do that because arena fighter characters don't typically need as much production time as traditional fighters. I'm not saying it's as easy as copy-pasting with new skins, but well, you can kinda see for yourself why arena fighters are able to have such large rosters with so many of your favorite characters. Here we're a bit more limited, as each character needs to be crafted to be as fun and as balanced as the rest of the roster as possible. If we weren't so limited and Toei had millions and millions just to throw into this single game, then sure, we could say the first iteration of Climax Arena has all 20 main Heisei Riders plus 01, Saber, Revi, and Geats. Then that would be the video, part over. However, I'd like to think this game wants to deliver a lot more in terms of quality, especially with a varied roster. With that in mind, I'm settling on 25 characters to start. It's a tiny bit more than the average fighting game, but it's Kamen Rider. There needs to be some kind of leeway. I also think we can import some previous models, spice them up, and boom, part of the development was just made easier. And so, Our first 3 riders have to be
A jump to the sky turns to a rider kick.
Kamen Rider Ichigo, Kamen Rider Kuga, and Kamen Rider 01. They're the obvious choices as they're the first of each era, Showa, Heisei, and Reiwa. They have history. They're iconic. The next question is, how would the game actually play? Since we have our first 3 fighters, imagine a basic fighting screen UI. Your health bar on top, a max super gauge at the bottom, and a slot for an assist. Someone like Ichigo would be straightforward. Your traditional quarter circle forwards, light, medium, and heavy attacks, an EX move, and super or finisher move. Basic, right? Now for the form-changing riders, and prepare yourself because this might disappoint, but it may also not come as a surprise. If you want to stay true to each rider, then you would just play as Kuga, immediately go into Kuga Ultimate, blow up the world, and win. So form changes aren't going to be a huge focus. Instead, I think they could be used as finishing and general moves only. Hey, Climax Fighters does that for certain forms, and that's one of the few things I actually like about that game. Imagine starting as Kuga Mighty. You begin your light combo, then you reach a certain threshold to turn into Titan form to throw your opponents in the air. You begin an air combo, so then you automatically turn into Dragon and finish off as Pegasus by shooting your bow as the opponent is juggled. The form changes would be automatic as you play into certain styles. At least that's how I think it would work for the most part, and I also think it would stand out from other fighters. Though I don't see them purely as pressing a button to change forms, since that got kinda annoying when Climax Fighters did it for Phase 2 riders. I know, Heisei Phase 2 riders are known to have a lot of forms too, but keep in mind, 01 with Flying Falcon or Freezing Bear don't have to be represented. I mean, would anyone really miss form changing into Flaming Tiger in a fighting game? I mean, maybe, but I don't know, it could be optional or something. With this, it can just be 01 with Shining Assault Hopper, Metal Cluster Hopper, and 02. Yes, it would be fun to have those other forms, but let's stay focused to really flesh out our fighters, rather than focusing on their countless forms. To help out a little bit, I'm also thinking about adding customization, specifically with your cinematic finisher. For example, your level 3 meters finisher could have 01 transform into 02, or unlock a special finisher as Realizing Hopper, or maybe even as Arc Zero. Kuga's finisher could be as Kuga Ultimate, or we can be a little silly and have him as Deke's final attack ride. This is purely for aesthetics and doesn't affect gameplay outside of damage dealt, but it adds that little bit of love and care. Not only that, but other customization could be added, like one victory screen for Kuga could be if you won the match with Ultimate, then Kuga's black eyes could flash, or 01's entrance animation could have Izu appearing briefly to give Aruto a progress key. Heck, you could even give Ichigo a skin to show his original blue suit and second suit. There's just a lot that can be shown with enough love. Okay, so our first quote-unquote what-if iteration is as simple as having a roster of 25 characters. All the main Heisei riders plus the 4 Reiwa riders, and we can also add Ichigo. Our second iteration is more limited, and yeah, we could just have them all be the main riders, but I want to challenge myself and add some more variety. With that said, to go along with Ichigo, Kuga, and 01, our next main rider will be Kamen Rider Double. If each main rider represents an era, then Double easily represents the beginning of Phase 2. And since we can't have Ichigo be the lone Showa rider, let's give him backups with Kamen Rider V3 and Kamen Rider Black in the roster. This is definitely blasphemous, especially to me because I actually prefer this character, but I think Nigo can be a recolor of Ichigo. However, hold on. If you don't like that idea, then I think Nigo could be a simple enough Echo fighter. Make Nigo lighter and faster while adding a slight variation to his animations. That aside, if not Nigo, then V3 would be the next easiest Showa representative, since he appeared alongside the first 2 riders quite a bit. And of course, Black as one of the most famous Showa riders, so easier too. Rounding off our era representatives, we have Kamen Rider Geats, since he's the most recent rider. He might not have a ton of moves, heck, he might not even have access to the Fever Buckle or Command form at this point, but Magnum Boost does sound fun enough. These aren't our only main riders, as we can also add Kamen Rider Decade, except he wouldn't count as part of the main roster. Instead, he's the random character selection. I know he's more of a capable fighter on his own, although I think this is the most fun idea. You can hover over him if you can't decide on a character, he appears on the battlefield, has a quick animation transforming into a random fighter, and you play as them for the round. I mean, to me that just sounds really awesome. I mean, it's a little funny, but it also just sounds like something completely in form of Decade. And in case you couldn't tell by my wording, yes, these would be our only main riders for the entire roster. Ichigo, V3, Black, Kuga, Double, 01, and Geats. But why? Because like I said, I'm giving myself a challenge, and I want to have a game that has new ideas that can craft itself into something that isn't as easily comparable to previous games. Climax Heroes and Fighters obviously included all the main riders from the start, so how about this? We represent each other's season without the title character. You and I both know these shows aren't just about single riders, except Kuga, and sometimes the show riders. And others deserve a fighting chance to really prove themselves as fan favorites and underdogs. With that said, let's go in order. Our next fighter is Kamen Rider G3X. Most riders are nimble, so imagine G3X stomping onto the battlefield with his gigantic gun. Heavy, but a hard hitter. You could kind of even say he's the obligatory grappler. I also think a cool super move would have him, Base Form G3, and G3 Mild shooting together. Final Smash Mega Man style. Kamen Rider Knight. Thankfully, we won't have too many sword fighters, or lance fighters, and Knight just looks cool. His super move as Survive would be pretty obvious too. Kamen Rider Kaiza, the man we love to hate, and it would be funny if his defeat animation had him turn into sand. Next, we're going to be skipping representatives for Blade and Hibiki. Unfortunately, a limited roster would also mean there has to be some cuts for one reason or another. Sorry all 2 Hibiki fans, including myself. Kamen Rider Gattack, the true protagonist of Kabuto, with a finisher that can go into hybrid form. Zeronos, the true protagonist of Dano. Just kidding. But someone from that season has to make it into the game, and he's my one personal pick. Skipping Kiva and O's through Wizard for now. It was kind of tough choosing someone from Gaim since there were a lot of great choices. Baron is a popular pick, Ryugen would make for a great zoner, even the villains would each be cool. But no one is cooler than Zangetsu. He won't rely on form changes outside of his Melon Energy finisher, so you know he'll look cool on the battlefield. Chase. I was heavily considering Mach, but Chase is a fan favorite, and I think a barrage attack for his super could start with Machine Chaser into Kamen Rider Chase. Necrom. I think everyone from Ghost would be cool fighters, though Necrom is another fan favorite, and I just think his design is great. Genom. Again, pretty much anyone from X8 would be fantastic choices, especially since they're around video games, though Genom can be both as silly and as serious as you want. Plus, a cinematic dangerous zombie finisher just sounds awesome. Cross. Banjo is already a professional fighter, it makes the most sense, and who doesn't love him? Waz. Iwai? Now onto Reiwa. Blades. If my personal choice wasn't already for Zeronos, then I'd say either Slash or Buster, but Blades is another good choice, since he can be a light sword fighter while Zangetsu can be medium. And finally, Demons. So many choices for Revice, but Demons would probably be wanted the most. Just don't play as him for too long, or else he'll grow old quickly. And that's it for the 20 character roster, each painstakingly chosen to build upon and pour lots of love and care into. But don't forget, we still have a season pass and reps from certain seasons are still missing, so let's start with Chalice, a lightweight fighter that won't make you sad. Todoroki, I would main him solely for being a guitar fighter. Ixa, I don't know, did you want me to say Dark Kiva instead? Then finally, Birth, Meteor, and Beast to fill out the entire roster with at least one rep from each season. And that's the roster for Kamen Rider Climax Arena. Sure, I would like it to be as realistic as possible, but this is also my dream rider fighting game that would be more than just main riders. If you want to go even further, then a second game can introduce us to more main riders, more villains, extra riders like Amazon Omega and Black Sun. Give us some monsters like Shadow Moon, Heart, and the greatest of all riders, Omagio. Yeah, that's what I would want. Or another memory of Heroes would be cool too.
Video has reached completion. See you next time.